Trying to think of a new gimmick to keep everyone on their toes. Anyway, time for another game theory video about how would I change Street Fighter, whatever. I think this is maybe video number 5. So again, unless you've watched those other videos to have an idea of like the general system changes I would do to Street Fighter, kind of a general idea, you have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. So probably watch those videos. And again, if you like these kind of nerdy videos, you can like them, sub, leave a comment, whatever. Silly comment, it helps. Blah, 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 whatever you want to do. Helps the channel. So one of the most important things is how would we change Ryu compared to Ken, right? And I talked about Ken in the last video. So let's talk about what we could do to differentiate Ryu from Ken, right? So again, and the Ken video was really long, I know, and the Ken video was not even as in-depth as I could have gone, but I'll make another kind of long-winded video without even being as in-depth as we could, I guess. Again, we're going to go off the basic idea of a stereotypical Ryu. So we're going to use a Super Turbo Ryu, Super Ryu, as a kind of, just think about it as the idea of Ryu. And one of the first things when we think about Ryu, when we look at his normals here in Super Turbo and, you know, Super Ryu, is we see a theme of something that is more common in games back then. So let's look at what we have here. Ryu does not have any moves in Super Turbo, say like his stand short, yeah, where, you know, where he kicks the guy in the shin, which hits the guy ducking, or his, you know, he has this kind of generic side kick that hits a guy ducking, right? So let's go back. Let's erase those. We don't want to. So the idea is that, you know, would I give Ryu these moves that, because if we're thinking about how games have progressed, fighting games, lots of characters generally have their kind of poking attack, if you will, that hits the character ducking, right? And when we look at an old school game like this, we see Ryu doesn't really have a lot of normals that actually do that, right? And would I change that for Ryu? And I think actually I probably would not, even though when we look at moves like, you know, say Ryu has a stand short and a stand forward, you know what I mean? That both are kind of doing the same thing and maybe redundant in a sense. We could give Ryu a stand forward like a, you know, Street Fighter 3 has it, or Street Fighter 5, or the stand short that, you know, he has in Alpha and other games like that. But because I'm trying to keep characters kind of their stereotypical strengths while going off of those and keeping characters more unique, I actually think you could keep Ryu more unique without giving him an attack like that. And I know this video is going to be long, but, and I'm sure if I made my own Street Fighter game, there would be an evil Ryu. So that would be a chance to actually give a evil Ryu a, you know, more kind of new school stand short or a stand forward that is more of a poking attack, right? Plus, if we're thinking about old school Street Fighter, although old school Street Fighter is, you know, I think it does well in terms of cross-up hitboxes, or when you're blocking it. Like, there's more differentiated hurt boxes, you know, blocking kind of hitboxes when you're blocking in terms of, you know, cross-ups and everything like that. Old school Street Fighter is not as lenient in terms of duck blocking when you block something. You know what I mean? It's not like, say, like maybe again a more new school game where bigger characters ducking, it's more common for them to be able to be hit by something ducking, whereas Super Turbo has some cliche examples like, you know, Dhalsim can be hit by, you know, certain characters' attacks while they're ducking. But so I think in that term too, Ryu, we could make some of his normals a little more lenient in terms of that, but giving him like specific a stand short or stand forward, I know this is really long-winded, no, I wouldn't worry about that with Ryu. Plus, you gotta remember, Ryu, yes, I know people complain about it nowadays. Yes, his like duck roundhouse would be, you know, cancel the fireball, all that kind of shit. So stop fucking complaining. All that shit is in the game, okay? But looking at his normals, what are some things we're going to give him, right? So he would have some of his Super Turbo normals, right? I mean, if we're thinking about it like this. So, of course, he would have the Rush Fierce, which hits you ducking, right? You know, Rush Fierce, give him the Super Turbo Rush Fierce, combo in and out of it, it's fast. His strong, Rush Strong, overhead, give him a quick overhead like that, you know, that keeps you blocking. And something that I've talked about before, would I have the hop kick in the game? And I do think you could put the hop kick in the game. And like I said, I made a video specifically about this. Of generally speaking, I think it's better to let a game evolve into its own beast and become its own beast and not have a game so pre-planned. But the hop kick is a move that should be pre-planned because the move is so potentially powerful if you think about it from the dynamic of a stereotypical Ryu who is so powerful with Fireball, Dragon Punch, Trap, kind of fundamental attacks, to give Ryu these more versatile attacks, hopping over a low, and of course a hop kick makes the guy block, ducking, and then in the course of thing, if Ryu's doing a rush fierce, you know what I mean, that is very powerful. So then if Ryu also had a hop kick, that also the hop kick would discourage from, trying to jab you out of a rush fierce if you were trying to abuse a rush fierce like that or short it. So I would give Ryu a hop kick, but the hop kick is a move that would have to be pre-planned. And it also shows why I think it's a good idea to have instantaneous throws. Although I do think throws being 2 buttons is actually kind of fun because there's kind of a fun meta for it and, option select mind game for it. I do think the hop kick is also a good example of why you should have 1 button throws, right? Or instant throws, instantaneous, right? So if we look at a hop kick, generally speaking, you know what I mean, in terms of a Ryu being a super turbo with such fundamentally core, strong aspects of the character, archetypical strengths, right? The hop kick is a bit of a conundrum because you're giving Ryu a potentially very powerful poking attack to make him a little potentially more versatile than you should. But, okay, so if we look at Ryu's hitbox on a hop kick right now. So what you would do is, we see this hitbox is huge as it is, right? So what you would do is, you see how big this thing is here? But when the move first starts off, this is what you would do. You would just make the red part of it is only filled up right now, right? So the red part is going to miss a ducking opponent, right? The opponent still has to block the hop kick if he's standing right there. But again, the hop kick, as it is in the first place, is not to hit a standing opponent. It's to hit a ducking opponent going for an attack, right? So then, say the move hits a few frames, whatever it is. Once it goes into its last frames, then this part becomes active of the hitbox, right? Then this part does hit the ducking opponent, right? This is important because having a move that is visually deceptive is not good. So we wouldn't want the hop kick just to be boom, it just totally whiffs even though his leg is right in front of the guy. That makes no sense, right? But we're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone here, right? So if we have instant throws, let's just say, I'm just going to throw out a random number. It doesn't really matter, but I mean, we could get more in depth, but hop kick. Say if the opponent blocks it standing, which is not the purpose of the move, it's, -1, maybe it's -2, whatever the fuck it is, right? And since throws are so powerful and instantaneous, if Ryu is using the hop kick wrongly and the opponent is standing to block it, Ryu gets thrown. If he's using it in a matchup like Dalsum, where Dalsum has a big throw range, and you're thinking about, man, Ryu versus Dalsum is a bad matchup because it's not a good matchup, right? Without getting too specifically, but now Ryu can actually kind of move in slowly, and this is also going to beat Dalsum's like low attacks, his slide. That could be very powerful, right? And throw a conundrum into the matchup. But if Dalsum were to block it standing, Dalsum gets a 3 throw. But now if the move were to hit ducking, since it hits a few frames, maybe if it actually hits ducking, it's either 0 or +1, right? So Ryu is not punished for the move, right? Do you get what I'm saying? You could fiddle with it more. Maybe on block, I mean, you could actually give it something. You could be really specific with it, right? But maybe on block, it's, -2, -1. Maybe on hit, it's -1, +1, whatever the fuck it is. But the point is, the hop kick is a good example of a move that should be more predetermined because it could throw a conundrum on the idea of Ryu, making Ryu too versatile, right? But hopefully you get what I'm getting at. If you pre-plan this move, and if you actually have throws that are fast, you can have Ryu throw a spin on his offensive pressure, giving him a poke that does hit an opponent ducking, you know what I mean, to give him a bit of a more new school flair, I guess, of fighting games that have more ducking kind of poking attacks, right? Without making it too powerful. Because again, if the opponent blocks it standing, you can be thrown for free, right? But if the opponent blocks it ducking or gets hit by it ducking, which is the real purpose of the move, it works as it's intended, right? So I think this would throw a good perspective on Ryu's like normals without making it too powerful. He has the Rush Fierce, you know what I mean? So boom, boom, it's very fast. It's a super turbo Rush Fierce. This does hit people ducking. So you know what I mean? You're throwing a spin on it. Maybe they start to become a little more, you know, they want to jab you out of it more, whatever it might be, you know what I mean? So then the hop kick becomes more useful. Hopefully what I'm getting at. So we're not giving Ryu any normal attack that hits low like that. He's not shorting the opponent's, like, you know, tap like that. Just like, you know, Ken and Super Turbo does have that stand short. Ken has his long stand roundhouse that hits the opponent ducking, right? Ken has more maybe a versatility with normals like that. But Ryu has kind of a sort of, he is versatile in some sense of the word, but they're more kind of specific, if you will. They're not as easygoing. Hopefully you get them. So that's something normal-wise that I think you could do to keep the spin of Ryu being a traditional character while throwing in a little bit of a spin on his stuff, right? So if we're looking at his normals, again, that's what I would do. What else do I look when I look at Ryu's normals, right? Do I think is worth talking about? Axe kick. I do think the axe kick could be a little bit better for what it is. I know in the new, or that guy made that Super Turbo Legacy, he made both hits do more damage, or the second hit do more damage. I do agree with that. I also do think the second hit should push you not quite as far away to make some of the links off it easier, because it is one of Ryu's few normals, again, that, you know, does hit a ducking opponent. So I do think you could be a little bit more lenient on that to make some links a little bit easier off it, you know. Also, I do think Ryu doesn't have his Stand Fierce from Street Fighter 3. How you could add Ryu's auto combo from Street Fighter 3, I do think you could add that in. So make Ryu Stand Fierce his big haymaker fierce like that, boom, boom, boom. And then he turns around with the roundhouse, blah, blah, blah. The auto combo, swoosh. How would I make the auto combo useful? Because it's not used very much. I do think you could be a little bit more lenient on, say, maybe big characters when they're ducking cannot duck the roundhouse. As it's coming down, maybe the roundhouse hits a few frames. The first couple frames miss, whatever it might be. But then as he's swinging his leg back, there's like a hitbox here that can actually hit large characters ducking. And I think you could make the auto combo Street Fighter 3, you know, fierce to roundhouse. I think you could make something also interesting to it. I think you could make it whiff cancelable, like car cancel, right? So Ryu, even if he's like mid-screen, fierce, roundhouse, whatever, right? Throws a new spin on it. And again, you know, I talked about this before. This is why I said you should, hopefully people have watched the other videos that I've talked about. I think you could make his fierce to roundhouse. I think you could make the roundhouse EX cancelable, right? So basically, generally it only hits standing people. But if you're thinking about Super Turbo, right? Let's say we have a dude here throwing a Hadouken, right? Hadouken. He's throwing his Hadouken, right? Blah, 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 blah. So now we have Ryu. Now, in Super Turbo, remember how I was going to add counter hits. Because I actually like this aspect of old school, generally speaking, counter hits, we're going to do something, you know, jumping attacks, we're not going to do something on counter hit. Because I like the idea of Super Turbo, how it had, you know, taking a hit to, like, get a throw, whatever, etc. like that. I like that aspect of spacing your jump-ins, and that's why fireball traps are very powerful, because you can't just hit an attack really early to punish the fireball, because then you won't be able to combo when you get into whole sack throws, all that kind of shit, right? But there are certain distances where, say, if Ryu jumps over a fireball, he's not in range, so he could only sweep. He's not in range for maybe a stand fierce to fireball punish, or a duck strong, duck forward to fireball punish, whatever it might be, right? And he could only hit a sweep, right? So maybe this could give Ryu, if you have EX meter or whatever, if Ryu punishes a fireball or some kind of jump in from far away, Ryu hits the guy from far away, jumps in with a fierce, since the guy is standing, then he does his stand fierce, stand roundhouse auto combo from Street Fighter 3, and then if you have EX meter, like I said, Ryu's thrust kick is an EX only move. Boom. Thrust kick, the guy bounces off the wall. Again, you're giving some of these move an actual real purpose, because Ryu's Street Fighter 3 auto combo really doesn't have a lot of use, right? So you're adding some uses to it, which I think would be good. Some specific, and again, I know it's bad to have moves that are sometimes too specific because games shouldn't be pre-planned. But when a move is not being used, you need to find a reason for it to be used, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Anyway, I think that's something you could do. Where are we? Besides that, you know, another thing too, looking at Ryu's stand roundhouse, just the far one, I do think it could be a little bit better for what it is. I guess you could tone up the priority a little bit if you wanted to, or make it do even a little bit more damage, because as it is basically generally a trade anti-air. You know what I mean? So I do think you could make it do maybe a smidge more damage or have a bit priority, because for what it is, if you're thinking about, and again, I know we're going off the idea of characters a lot here, it is a little weak for what it is. What else do we have? Something that I think was good in, what did they add? I know Ryu, they added a new legacy. What was it? Ryu's jump short has a smaller hurt box on this, so he can actually not be swept by characters like Dawson that just can like slide him for free. I think that's a good change. You could add something like that. I do think Ryu's normal jump forward medium kick is probably potentially even his like least useful normal. It doesn't have a lot of real purpose. I guess you could give him a sort of, maybe make it the Street Fighter 5 animation of his jump roundhouse, right? But give it a lower hurt box, so again, something that can actually beat slide anti-airs in that situation if it was a straight up neutral jump forward. Fireballs, what would I do for fireballs if we're thinking about a traditional Ryu? I know these videos are long, and I'm not even getting as in-depth as I could, but what would I do for this? I think generally speaking, blue fireballs, so we have a baby slow fireball here, and then we have the fast fireball. Let's do the correct super turbo fireball. It's got that little blue here. I know some people don't like how it looks in super turbo, but I think it looks kind of ghetto and kind of cool how it looks like that. Anyway, I think that the blue version, they could do something to distinguish the fireball. Let's put his hands in here. Hadouken. That's it. Well, that's his hands. You get the idea. Actually, they're black, aren't they? Let's put on the glove. Anyway. I do think, in terms of Super Turbo, the difference between a red fireball and a blue fireball, I think the blue fireball, the slow one, should be a smidge slower. So say if we have the red fireball right here, this is how it normally is. That's the slow baby one. There's his hands in it. And then we have the fast fireballs over here. Blue, boo, 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 boo. Let's do it correctly. It looks ghetto, but it looks kind of cool. I don't know. Anyway, I do think you could make the speed difference a little bit more different between them. Again, blue fireball does more stun, so keep that. Have it do more dizzy as it does. Blue fireball, slightly a little bit slower. Has a bigger differences between the slow and the fast one, whereas the red fireball has the same kind of differences, right? I think you could do that. I do think that I don't agree with the the idea of Super Turbo has the car cancel jabs and everything to make your fireball recovery different. So keep it standardized. Hope we get that. I think that could be something different for Ryu's fireballs. Keep that. What else do we have here? Blah 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 blah. DP. So let's look at the Super Turbo DP. In terms of Super Turbo, I think the jab and the strong could both be a few frames more invincibility. They get beat too much for what they are, I think. And I think the strong one should have, if there's that one property that's in Super Turbo for a few moves, but if we think about it, they originally added an Alpha 2 for the medium punch DP. I do think the medium punch DP could do the full screen, knock the guy back, you know what I mean, when it gets hit. I think that's something you could do to add it to make it a little bit interesting. And I do think people are probably mad, Fierce DP should be totally invincible. I know that makes some people mad, but yes, Fierce DP should be totally invincible all the way up. Stop complaining. Stop being a little bitch. Hurricane Kick, I think it should be either one frame more invincible, because I do like the option select stuff in Super Turbo and Super, and specifically, or he should move a frame further ahead, because there's this misconception that they took away the ability for Ryu to go through fireballs with this Hurricane Kick in Super Turbo. And the difference really is just that it only goes through, say, DJ's fireball. Because it's so small, you can go through standalone. But most characters, Like if Ken's throwing a fireball on you, whatever, it can only go through the fireball if it's right on top of you, so as if done as a meaty. But sometimes when characters do the slow version, you can still be hit by the trail end of it. So if you made it like one more frame invincible, whatever, I think it should be slightly a smidge more invincible, or make it a frame further so it goes through fireballs a little bit smidge easier on those reversal circumstances. Also, something I talked about because I like it, I talked about how some characters should have, you should have that rolling animation, right? So here's Ryu doing his hurricane kick, right? Tatsumaki Senpu kick. So what you should do for this, I think the medium one should cause the roll factor. You know, like I said, I've talked about it in other videos, you'd have to watch it. So make it so Ryu, you gotta have moves that have a use, right? So there has to be a use for Ryu. Why would Ryu ever do a medium kick, hurricane kick during a combo and not like the roundhouse, right? There's not like a lot of purpose for it. So make the medium kick one if you do a hurricane kick and it hits the guy. They do the rolling effect, and then you can get those alpha sort of mix-ups of you know, walk over the body while it's falling in the corner, or walk back, kind of a cross-up. Spice Ryu up a little bit in terms of that. Make that for the medium kick, hurricane kick. I think that would be fun. Other besides that, what do we have normal? So Ryu's jump, medium punch. I know this is going to sound really fucking weird. I wish he actually had the option to I wish this was almost a command normal in the game, because there are certain matchups where Ryu's the hang tom on old school Super Ryu's medium punch is actually good. So I actually almost wish that was an option, because the hang time on that actually makes that beat certain moves that this doesn't. But I do think, for what it's worth, this move does do too much damage in Super Turbo, so I would tone down the medium punch in terms of damage, because I think it does too much damage for what it is. But in terms of juggling, so if we're going into system, or let's go, first of all, let's finish his special moves. Of course, for EX moves, I would say his EX move, he can have his thrust kick from Street Fighter 3, his EX move, blah, 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 so it's not redundant. EX move smashes you off the wall. So then again, I talked about this some in the other video. So then the main gimmick is, because if you even think about even as powerful as fireballs are in Super Turbo, remember, a fireball does not even combo from max range from Ryu's duck forward into a fireball. As fast as you conceptualize or think about, you know, generally speaking, fireballs in Super Turbo, a fireball doesn't even combo from Ryu's duck forward from max distance. So thrust kick, you know, if Ryu has a little bit extra meter, he can thrust kick and it would combo from that. The guy bounces off the wall. What can you do in that situation? You can DP, or as I talked about in the other videos, since we're having kind of a modified alpha, CVS2, Super Turbo, whatever, or if you wanted to go for a mix-up, Ryu could, after the thrust kick, you could stand jab like you can in alpha, hits the guy, then you could jump up to a jump medium punch, it juggles. And jump medium punch specifically, how I talked about how I would do juggles, is the move basically has 3 or 4 juggle points depending on how you want to talk about it. But so the first jump strong, if it hits, the guy is juggled. If you go for the jump strong again, the first hit will hit and it's still juggling the guy, but if then at the 4th hit hits, the guy automatically flips out because you've used up the juggle points for that, and now the guy can't be juggled again. Again, I've talked about this in another video about, and I could go even more specifically how you'd have to program the juggles, but that would give Ryu something interesting. So Ryu, basic options, again, you thrust kick after that, you DP to combo the guy, or if you want to go for a mix-up, you could jab, hits the guy, then jump up, medium punch the guy again, the guy flips out, then you could do some walk under stuff. Or if you had EX meter, I talked about Ryu's EX moves could be his, wow, what is with this thing is looking weird. Or the other EX move for Ryu, I would give him his Street Fighter EX Hurricane Kick. You know, where it's like the Mizoguchi Rekka Hurricane Kick. And that Hurricane Kick's gimmick would be that it juggles, you know what I mean? Because it has to have a purpose. Blah, 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 blah. He's spinning around and then he goes like that. Chisto! And then he slams the guy down. Roundhouse. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. Juggles the guy, whatever, blah, blah. And this would go through fireballs, right? It has like some extra property because you know what? I said in this game too, I know in new school games there's an idea that hurricane kicks always go through fireballs. I don't like that. Just keep it going through Dalsum and Sagat's, or Dalsum and Dhalsim and Giles fireballs because, you know, they're so fundamentally powerful versus those characters if you don't have that. But anyway, so the general speaking of Hurricane Kicks always go through fireballs once it's spinning. I would not have it in this game. But give Ryu his EX Hurricane Kick so it goes through a fireball like that, blah, blah, blah. Or it can juggle, you know what I mean? And if he does it in the air, he does his, what we regularly think of as the Shinku Tatsumaki Senpu Kyuk. He spins around, blah, blah. So then again, this situation, if Ryu had extra meter, boom, thrust kick goes to the jab, jump, medium punch. Jump, medium punch only does one hit. Then he cancels to EX, Hurricane Kick, wacky combo, blah, blah. You get it, right? And then, of course, hopefully, you'd have to watch the other video because I don't want to go too specific into this. Have people watch the other videos. How does Ryu also use the meter? He uses the meter with the one gimmick that I talked about in the game of when you special move, cancel a move into another special move, it makes the next special move automatically juggle and it gives the next extra special move a juggle point. Watch how that would be implemented into the game. If you want to know more about that, I can make a more specific video about that. But it's in a video. Gives Ryu some core fundamental strengths, whatever. So Ryu could DP. He cancels it. The guy's flying across the screen. Ryu does a Hurricane Kick. Blah. Hits the guy then. Then Hurricane Kick, which normally does not juggle or doesn't normally juggle itself, and it normally is not juggleable after. Then it juggles again. So then Ryu could do a stand jab into a jump medium punch juggle. A little versatile there. I've also thought of some pretty wacky stuff with the fireball you could do, but I'm sure this video is already like 20 minutes, right? So it's getting pretty long, right? Anyway. Other than that, you know what I mean? I'd give Ryu a Super Fireball. Super Fireball, you know what I mean? Fast, effective. Don't give me into this bullshit like Super Fireballs are slow, you know, in some games like Alpha 2 and Alpha 3. That's fucking bullshit. Get rid of that bullshit. That's fucking, this shit is sucking stupid. You know what I mean? Would I give him a regular Super Hurricane Kick? He could potentially have a regular Super Hurricane Kick. It's a little bit redundant since I'm making the EX Hurricane Kick in the air be the old school one, but I guess you could, and it would add to some potentially fun kind of CVS 2 cancels, whatever. You could potentially add that. And then I said his level 3 would be the Shin Shoryuken, and I talked about how, what would you do? Since the game has different buttons, and each one does, one button would give him a Shin Shoryuken that is a, you know, a Street Fighter 3 style Shin Shoryuken that juggles, and you can juggle after, but it is not as powerful. And one Shin Shoryuken would be legitimately a CVS 1 Shin Shoryuken. You've lost 75% of your life, but no juggle after it, no potential to build more meter. You know what I mean? Not as easy to be comboable from like super canceling, all that kind of stuff. Make the guy pick and choose. So basically, you'd have a Shin Shoryuken, a CVS 1 Shin Shoryuken. You would press that button if you wanted that one. If the guy was jumping at you, boom, 75% life. Stop complaining. That's fucking video games. And if you had more meter, you know what I mean? And you wanted to be able to build a little bit more meter afterwards because it's like the beginning of the match and you're doing a combo, you'd have a Street Fighter 3 Shin Shoryuken that is a level 3 that's a little more versatile, blah, blah, blah. Could he have a Dinjin Hadouken? I guess he could. You could try to figure it out into the game. I'd make it a level 3, you know what I mean, whatever. But anyway, I guess since it's almost 30 minutes, I guess one of the things I was going to say, you'd have to watch the other video. What you could do is I've thought of how would I program this, which I can't program, but I've thought of a way that you might have to program it into this game, because if you thought about this, how the juggle system works with the gimmick of the special moves that takes so much meter. I guess if you're going through a theory that when you're programming the game that the next hit always juggles, and then you're putting some program into the game that it makes the next hit an automatic counter hit, if we're almost thinking about like King of Fighters, which then lets something juggle, you could potentially add a couple of wacky things to Ryu. Like say if Ryu was to do a jump in, fear stuck forward, fireball. He cancels it, so he does a fireball, boom, boom, boom. He hits the guy, right? Boom, smack. Hits the dude. Then he special move cancels it into perhaps the red fireball. And perhaps the red fireball, when it hits on a counter hit, and it doesn't hit with this version of it, you know what I mean, the shield, whatever, blah, blah. It does like a lot of extra stun on counter hit, which, you know, how many times are you getting hit by a red fireball in a counter hit in that kind of instance, right? When it doesn't hit with the shield. Then it makes the guy go into like a stagger effect where you could walk forward, do a combo. There could be so many weird things. Like I said, if I knew how to program, I would actually like put this up and like show you like some proofs of concept of how it could work. But anyway, hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of how I would differentiate Ryu and Ken. You know, Ken has a lot of different kind of wacky stuff. He abuses. He uses the game system in so many different ways. You've like toned up so many different things. He pokes a little bit better than Ryu. Ryu doesn't have as many like normal ideas of poking, which exists now in kind of like fighting games, I guess, if you will. But he still has versatile. He has a lot of like core fundamental strengths of Ryu. Powerful fireball, dragon punch traps, you know what I mean, blah, blah, blah. Uses the game system in his own kind of way. I think you could actually really differentiate Ryu versus Ken there. Anyway, this video is really long. I could go more in depth, but the video is already long enough, right? So let's just stop there.